Hey, Bleacher Report. I'm Garrett Gonzales, a.k.a. Double G, alongside Brad Evans. We are from the Thompson to Clark podcast here to talk Giants trade deadline. We're going to let some more folks trickle in here in a bit. But seeing the chat already, I don't imagine we have very many happy Giants fans right now. And we're going to try and make some sense of it. We... On our podcast, we try not to be homers, and we try and make sense of what is going on from the perspective of how the team functions. But I get the frustration because there were some names out there who we had talked about the last time we were on Bleacher Report doing our stream. There were some names of guys that we wanted. Some of those guys did actually go to other teams. Some didn't, like someone like Marcus Stroman, who we wanted. But he stayed because the Cubs are staying pat. And but yeah, I understand the frustration. We'll try and get through a lot of this, and we are going to throw some polls up for folks to. And why don't while we're at it, let's just throw up the first poll, because I'm expecting. I think I know where this is going, and we're going to talk about the one trade that the Giants did make. We'll talk about that here in a second. But the first poll question is, did the Giants do enough at the trade deadline? And your options are yes, no, and heck nah. So I kind of think I know what's going to win there. But
yeah,
let's actually get started with the podcast. I'll reintroduce myself, Garrett Gonzales. We got Brad Evans. We're Thompson to Clark. I think we got a bunch of people in the stream now. So let's go ahead and talk about this, Brad. The Giants made one deal, which was yesterday. It was AJ Pollock, and they also picked up a minor league player, a 28-year-old minor league player, by the way, by the name of Mark Mathias. They didn't give up anything as far as we know. It's the old player to be named later, or cash. They also got cash in the deal themselves. So why don't we break down this AJ Pollock thing, and then the rest of this show is going to be about what the Giants didn't do rather than what they did do.
Yeah, I see the frustration in the comments, and people are very angry with Farhan, and I get it. But this is a team that's 9 games over 500. This is an organization that won 107 games a couple of years ago. Last year, 500. And looking at the roster, I mean, you look at the roster and you go, this team is 9 games over 500. And if you were to look at that roster, you'd say, there's no way in hell that roster is 9 games over 500. But the right moves are being made for what they have. AJ Pollock is a bit player. He's going to fill the void until Haniger comes back. Possibly the on fire Elio Ramos, who's hit 317. What's his slash in July? 317, 352, 646. 5 home runs. Power's not quite there in July, and only 4 walks in July. Not really what the Giants look for. They like a guy who can get on base. But 317 put the ball in play, and also a good defensive outfielder. So AJ Pollock's just going to kind of be there as a stopgap. He's a veteran. That's kind of what the Giants are looking for. This team is packed with rookies. When you get to that rookie part of the lineup, when you start hitting 5 through 8, and they're all rookies, or 5 through 9 even, and they're all rookies, you start to get a little worried. You say, well, it would be nice to have a veteran presence in that lineup to have some of these at-bats with runners on in key situations late in ball games. But AJ Pollock, you get that. It's not – you didn't give up anything, right? You gave up really nothing when it comes down to it.
Yeah, you gave up nothing.
So yeah, exactly. So it's a move that is worthy of getting the Farhan stamp of approval, and I know a lot of people don't like it. Look at what's the poll doing right now. Where are we at?
The poll.
Yeah,
the poll is at
we're at 43. 42% no, 54% heck nah, and 4% yes. I mean, that's it. People don't like it. People don't like the AJ Pollock move. They would like it more, and they'd be accepting of it if Verlander was in a Giants uniform today. That wasn't going to happen. You'd have to eat a ton of money for that. Plus, you'd have to give up prospects. When you look across the board on what the Giants didn't do, you can look at the names that are still here, and that's Patrick Bailey, Casey Schmidt, Luis Matos,
Luciano,
Marco Luciano, Elio Ramos, Joey Bart. Throw tomatoes at me, but again, having that guy that can come up late in the year. Let's say Sable gets hurt, Patrick Bailey gets hurt. You do have a catcher who has major league experience in the minors in Joey Bart. So to put a positive spin on it, the Giants didn't make many changes, but wait until we look to see what the Dodgers, the D-backs, and the Padres did, and then it's going to look a little bit uglier. But have faith. Have faith. FZ is trash. There you go.
Yeah, Farhan's taking a beating in our chat, and this is something that we talked about because we were kind of feeling this way before the season started, and some of it is based on what Farhan himself has said, which is they're not saddled by this idea that payroll and we're not going to be in, we can't play with the big boys. He's like, no, that's not true. Like we're going to be competitive with all of these other big market teams. So him saying that, and then also going to the press and saying, yeah, we're going to be aggressive. Like we need to add pieces. If he doesn't say those things, and if he plays it a little bit more conservative, then your fan base doesn't have the ammo that they have right now that is going on in our chat about the moves that they didn't make. Brad, by the way, I'm not sure your mic is technically picking up. So just an FYI. All right. So the second poll, I'm going to throw the second poll out there, and it is kind of along the lines of what Brad mentioned, which is, and I think I see this in the chat as well. There were some big game starting pitchers out there, and the Giants really only have 2 starting pitchers right now that you can count on, with Logan Webb and Alex Cobb. And then Cobb was down yesterday because he had a stomach ailment. So really, that's even more risky with someone like Cobb. Stomach ailment's not really an injury, but he has been injured in the past. So the second poll that we're throwing out there is, which big name starter should the Giants have gone after? We only could put 4 in the poll. So I put Verlander, Scherzer, Giolito, and Montgomery in there. And you have to think of it in the way of, would the Giants, who is the Acuna level prospect that the Giants would have had to give up to get someone like Scherzer, right? Like you have to look at it in that way. I saw Grant Brisbee. Grant Brisbee thought the Giants should have been in on somebody like Montgomery. He thought maybe they could have been in on a Giolito too. So that's where that question comes from. But let's actually look at what the Giants didn't trade for. So we did this show last week, and we had some guys on our board as far as who we want to see in Giants uniform. The one who was kind of out there, and the Giants did not pick him up, is Paul DeJong, and Toronto, the Blue Jays, picked him up earlier today. What did you think about Paul DeJong? He was kind of out there. He was on our list. Tim Anderson stayed. Tim Anderson was also on our list. Stroman stayed. But DeJong was out there and got traded. The Giants did not get in that mix.
Yeah, and I think I fixed the mic issue there.
Okay.
I think with Paul DeJong, the Blue Jays needed another middle infielder, and not because of the Bo Bichette injury that ended up not being as bad as they thought it was going to be. I think they were kind of going after a middle infielder. And the way you got to look at it too, I don't think the Giants were willing to give up prospects for players like DeJong or an over-the-hill Max Scherzer, who's really having a not great season, has already been suspended this year for manipulated spin rate with his sticky ball. The sticky stuff, man. That's gonna be a bone of contention for years to come until they finally figure that one out. Baseballs, Japan, they use sticky baseballs, and I think we could do that. But either way, Paul DeJong would have been nice. Tim Anderson would have been nice. There's players that would have been nice. But more than anything, starting pitching, that's where the Giants are going to struggle the rest of the season. Now, remember, there still will be some DFA players, and I know they're not going to be sexy names. And they're not going to be, since, the new rules with the new CBA, you're not going to be able to have those pitchers throw in the postseason. So anybody you get who's DFA'd by another team who you can pick up off waivers, they're going to help you in the regular season. They're going to save some arms for the Giants who are already on the roster right now who could possibly pitch in the postseason. Because remember, this team still currently holds a wild card spot.
Yes.
Other teams who are fighting for wild card spots have made moves. Doesn't necessarily guarantee that those teams are going to jump us and get into the playoffs. But when you look at the starting pitching going forward, the Giants have two starters. They got Logan Webb. They got Alex Cobb. After that, throw a dart, throw a shoe in the air. Who knows who you've got from that point on? DeSclafani is on the IL with a shoulder injury and an elbow injury. That's something you never really want to see from a pitcher, especially this late in the season. You've got your openers, Ryan Walker, Sean Alexander. These guys are going to get you to your Sean Menez, your Ross Stripling, Tristan Beck, Sean Jelly, who just came back up today, was reactivated. Alex up to no good Wood. He's still with the Giants on the roster, so he's another arm. So the Giants, technically, they've got 7 or 8 starters still. None of them fantastic, but we're starting to see a little bit out of Stripling. We're starting to see a little bit out of Manea. Unfortunately, Keaton Wynn is hurt. And Kyle Harrison made a start 2 nights ago, I think it was, coming off the hamstring injury. So if they can ramp him back up to speed as well, he could be up. That's another reinforcement arm. Again, it's just one of those situations where Farhan probably didn't see a situation where I can give up these prospects and this is a difference maker we're going to get in return. That just didn't happen. Other teams who are on the cusp, who are right there, who are jockeying for higher positions in the playoffs, who could go further and deeper World Series teams like, the Rangers, the Astros. Those are the teams, the Orioles, that made these moves that said, these are the difference makers. We are going to give up high-level prospects of ours to get those. The Giants stood pat. And again, Farhan has been trying to build this minor league system for years. We're starting to just scratch the surface of the rewards that we're getting from this minor league system this season. And so next year, and the year after, we're going to see these players. We're going to have these players. This team is going, they're going to be playing meaningful baseball in September and hopefully into October without breaking the bank to get a Paul DeJong.
Well, I would say, and if you look at the team in the last few days, they are struggling at the plate. And, some of it is, you're coming up in clutch situations and you have young players coming up to the plate with runners on and you need a big hit from a young guy and it's not happening. When Wilmer Flores is your most clutch hitter and the guy who is on a roll, and Wilmer's a good hitter, but he shouldn't be the best hitter in your lineup. If Wilmer's the best hitter in your lineup, then your offense is probably not great. So the thing about it for me is I didn't really see any bats. Like, this isn't like we had this discussion earlier today, but there wasn't really a Chris Bryant out there for the Giants to go chase who you could sit in 3, 4, 5 spot and go, we're adding some, somebody who's going to be a big player, someone the pitchers have to think about. They're really relying on JD Davis and Wilmer Flores and Jock Peterson, and now someone like AJ Pollock against lefties. And so, this could be sort of the, you have some vets and we've talked Cody Ross and Pat Burrell in the past, and maybe there's a story there. But if I'm one of those other teams and I go, who do I need to pitch around to beat the Giants? You don't really have to pitch around anybody, which is part of the problem with their offense. And so to not see them make an attempt to go grab somebody, because there were some hitters out there, nobody who stood out, but outside of Pollock, there was nobody else that they even took a flyer on, which this is not going to this is not going to be something popular by the people, by the fan base who want that name. But what it tells me is that they believe that the rookies, the young players that they have, were better than who was out there. So instead of trading somebody who could help you for another team's problem, they stayed pat, which again, maybe you shouldn't have gone out in the public and say, hey, we're going to be moving and shaking at the trade deadline. Because when you say that, you just set an expectation up that unless you get Shohei or Verlander or Scherzer, the fans are going to be like, oh, like I thought you were actually going to do something. So, that's I just wanted to update the poll. The people, the people who voted in the poll, they had Giolito and Montgomery as the two top folks who they would have rather chased. Okay, so what does this become for the Giants? And this kind of goes back to the point that I just made, that there are people, they believe that the players on the team and players coming back are going to be better than who they could have gone out there and traded for. And some of these are solid names. Thairo Estrada is on his way back. You could have argued that he was your offensive MVP before he got hurt. Mitch Haniger, who has not done anything, and he was pretty much a disappointment and then got hurt, but also has power, just has not shown it yet. Somebody like Luis Gonzalez, who you're not going to throw in there as an everyday player, but we know he can hit the baseball, and he can hit it at least average-wise at a decent level. So are the people who were out there who you could have traded for going to unseat a Thairo or a Haniger or a Gonzalez? I don't know. It's possible. And you've also mentioned Elliot Ramos, who is kind of in that mix there, depending on if they believe in him, because really it's a faith thing at this point. They're like, how many times you have to bring this kid up for him to do nothing and then send him back down, and then he hits and then he comes back up and he does nothing. Like there's a faith piece there, but that is an option. And so I wanted to ask you, and we're going to put another poll up about which Giants player may help them most when they return, because it is Estrada, it is Haniger, it is Gonzalez. And I also threw John Brebbia in there because of the way that the Giants handle their bullpen. I have a feeling that Brebbia is, when he's healthy, he's going to get a lot of innings. They're going to be depending on him a lot. So what is your thought on the thesis statement that what the Giants have coming back may have been, in their mind, better than what they could have got out there in the trade market?
I mean, obviously, Thairo, he really changes things on the middle infield for the Giants. Also at the top of the order, if you can go back to how he was hitting in April, May, part of June, I think that lengthens your lineup. That also takes a rookie out of your lineup. We don't have to see Brett Wisely anymore. Especially now that B-Craw is back.
What about that hair? What about that hair, though? I'm gonna miss that hair.
Well, I mean, the flow is dope, but you can only have. I mean, B-Craw's already got the flow. So
yeah, there you go. They're almost the same flow at this point.
Yeah, exactly. But Thairo has really worked on his defense this past offseason. He's a much better player than he was last year, and he's improving as time goes on as well. So Thairo, I think, is the obvious and the only answer really when it comes down to it. I mean, looking at what the Diamondbacks did, and I'm going to go with F-WAR. I'm going to go with Fangraph WAR. So the Diamondbacks basically added 2.7 F-WAR at the trade deadline. Padres added 1.4, and the Dodgers, they got a lot of players, but they only added 0.4 F-WAR.
Did we add a minus F-WAR?
At the trade deadline? We added a minus half. Minus 0.5 F-WAR and AJ Pollock. I'm sure nobody's shocked at that.
Oh man!
I saw somebody else had him at a WAR of minus 1.4. But again, veteran presence, veteran in the clubhouse. You really can't discount that. Again, is it the greatest move in the history of baseball? Is it Ellis Burks in 1998? No, it's not. Is it Marco Scudero in 2012? No. So it's not those types of moves. Could it be a Cody Ross? Could it be a Pat Burrell? It's possible, if he can get a couple of key at bats. Again, he's not going to be around very long when Haniger comes back. There may not be a need for him at that point. It depends on what Matos is doing as well. If Haniger comes back and Matos is struggling, maybe Matos goes back down, and then you've got Haniger. And again, the other thing too is that we're not going to see is Jock Peterson in left field, which is awesome. So nobody wants to see Jock Peterson in left field, and having AJ Pollock on the roster affords you to keep him in the DH role and a pinch hitter off the bench.
So the voters in the poll very much. I mean, the answer is Estrada. That was kind of an easy poll question. So there's a couple Haniger votes. There was one Brebbia vote as well, but it is Estrada. 86% of the poll. So my thought on basically on we're hedging our bets here, because the reason why you have to find a Pollock is because Haniger got injured. Why is Haniger injured? Well, I mean, injuries are, you can't predict them, but it's not like he's 25 years old. He got hit on the hand, whatever. But you have a veteran heavy roster when it comes to the injuries. So there is a predictability in that a little bit. Yaz just hurt his hamstring for like the third time this season. Can you depend on him in the stretch run? Well, now he's possibly out 2 to 3 weeks. So you bring back players, and Tyro's going to be solid. Haniger will just help with the options. Pollock is also coming off of an injury. So it seems it's just a little bit too much for me of recycling older players who cannot stay healthy. Slater is great when you can plug him in and, you pinch hit him and he's a right-handed hitter and he goes yard and he wins you a ball game. But then 2 weeks later, he's hurt. And so it's just hard to depend on these guys. And I guess that is my overall problem with what they didn't do at the trade deadline, is some of this stuff is going to be predictable. And you need to find a player so that Farhan and team really need to work that roster and go, oh, we may have to make a hard decision here. Maybe it is Casey Schmidt's got to go back down because we actually found somebody who are going to be able to plug in every day. They didn't do that. That is my biggest problem with this deadline. You add an AJ Pollock if you have so much depth in that lineup and you're maybe lacking a bench vet savvy guy, clutch hit. That's where you add the AJ Pollock if that's your only move. Now, I am assuming Farhan did not believe that this was going to be his only move. He probably thought, well, this is a move that we can make. I don't know if people read the Andy Baggerly story about him and Haniger, and great clubhouse guy. All that stuff makes sense to me. It's great to add to the team, but you really needed a game changer offensively. I don't think that there were guys who were game changers offensively out there, but they could have done more to push some of the younger players and possibly take a spot that would be helpful down the stretch. That's kind of my frustration with what they did at the deadline. Okay. So, maybe some good news here is my next question for everybody. And we'll throw this poll up as well. And it's about Kyle Harrison. Now we're talking about Logan Webb. We're talking about Alex Cobb. Those are their only two starters that you can depend on. You're playing. You're having openers. Ryan Walker has been opening games. Brebbia will, when he comes back, he'll open games. How long until Kyle Harrison comes up? Now he kind of got stunted a little bit because he got injured. My guess is he would have been up already. He may have even beat Luciano to the team. I feel like he needs to be up within the next 2 weeks. What says you, Brad Evans?
I think he does, and I think they're going to ramp him up pretty quickly here. He's probably coming up on his with the injury, it probably set him back a little bit, but he's going to have an innings pitch limit, just like most young guys are going to. So if he's going to make any impact, it's going to have to be fairly soon. So within the next 2 weeks, I think that's going to be the case. Going to at least and he's probably going to come up and be your Keaton Wynn type of guy, your Tristan Beck type of guy, who's going to take it over from the opener. But again, he could surprise us. They could surprise us, and he can end up being, a starter, an actual starter, which we don't see very often as Giants fans anymore.
There's actually some people in the chat who don't think that he's coming up, which is actually interesting to me because it seemed like they were creating the red carpet for him to come up. But there are some Giants fans in our chat who don't think that he's coming up. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, and I see that, and there's control issues that still aren't 100% taken care of. But hey, it's time. I think he's not on the 40-man though, so they're gonna have to make room for him to get on the 40-man. That's one issue. So is it an AJ Pollock move when Haniger comes back? But Haniger's on the 60-day, so there's going to be a lot of jockeying that's going to happen. Yeah. But again, we've learned as Giants fans the last few years, this is a one day at a time team. You have no idea what the roster is going to look like tomorrow versus today. So that could easily change. But yeah, I think he'll be up within the next 2 weeks. They need him to. I mean, with no move for a starting pitcher made at the trade deadline, they really need him. They need some sort of boost to the pitching staff at this point.
So throwing a wrench into this whole thing is DeSclafani, who we haven't been able to depend on for the last 2 years. That DeSclafani is hurt again, and there's some worry here that it could be a longer injury for him, and if they have to put him on the 60-day, he's done for the season. So he's not someone they can rely on. Alex Wood was heavily rumored to be moved. They did not move him, so I guess he's gonna keep plugging away unless he's one of those guys that could get. What is his contract status at this point? Like,
I could take a quick look, but I think he's got one more year on.
Okay, so it's not like they can just DFA him. There's some interesting things that and interesting in sort of a negative sense, because we don't know what else they can do. It's not, you have Tristan Beck as a great swing man. Keaton Wynn looks like he may be done for the season. So there's just so many questions that Kyle Harrison, if he's comes up and he pitches well, he solves some of that, but still, like, man, you're relying on a 21-year-old rookie to be your number 3 starter, and I guess that means 2 openers out of so long bullpen games, and so it's a lot of Manea, it's a lot of Stripling, it's a lot of Beck, and a lot of the Rogers brothers, and you're relying so much on the bullpen. So that's that's kind of where the Giants sit with the pitching staff. We have a couple more minutes here. I wanted to throw out one more question. By the way, the poll, 32% say no on Harrison in the next 2 to 3 weeks. 21% say, or 68%, 21 votes say yes. Actually, you know what? That was my last poll. Okay, but the last thing I wanted to ask you about, Brad, before we get out of here, is there a player, maybe we haven't talked about that player, or maybe we've talked about them a little bit, who you believe might be of some help as a surprise late in this season to help the Giants win a few ball games? Is it Ramos? You mentioned Ramos before. Could it be Elio?
Honestly, that's the one player that I'm looking at. And I see the Bart hate in the chat. But honestly, I think he's the other one. The bat is starting to come around in the minors. He is. So when it comes down to when you have a backup catcher, say Bailey can't go for some reason, dings his knee, his elbow. Do you want Sable to start 5 or 6 games in a row? I don't. Defensively, I do not want Sable behind the plate for 5 or 6 games in a row.
Yeah.
I want Joey Bart with the experience. Catcher is such a huge position, especially when you're talking about how banged up and ugly our starting pitching is. You want a presence back there who has been to the majors, who has caught at Oracle Park. You don't want Blake Sable and then just whoever else you can find off the street at that point.
Yeah.
So Bart wasn't moved, and he's not going to be moved. We're past the trade deadline. If anything, and they're not going to DFA him. He was a number 2 pick overall. They're not going to DFA him. He's going to be here the rest of the season. That is the guy I think is going to play a part going forward to help the Giants down the line. I'm not talking about help them win the World Series or do anything huge, but he is going to be a hole, a fill for a hole that could come up down the season. Because, again, you've got a rookie catcher in Patrick Bailey, and you got a really inexperienced catcher in Blake Sable.
All right. I kind of agree with you. It's probably going to be like a Bart or Ramos type, but there's a guy who I kind of wonder, we keep moving up Brett Wisely back and forth. And I know this has a lot to do with your 40-man, but they have a 25-year-old shortstop by the name of Tyler Fitzgerald, who is in Sacramento. And he is he's having a really good year, probably his best offensive year in the minors. And I know he's pretty good defensively, and they've been moving him around. I kind of wonder if someone like Tyler Fitzgerald is someone who can help, but then you are playing with the idea of yet another rookie. And we already have Matos. We already have Luciano. We already have Bailey. Schmidt. So that is adding another rookie to this puzzle. So it may not be him, but I just like the idea that, you have somebody who know, Brandon Crawford's been up and down and hurt and dinged up all year long. Someone like a Tyler Fitzgerald could be a little bit of a surprise, but he's really like a big, he's a shot in the dark kind of surprise. I would love to see Ramos though. I'm with you on Ramos. All right. Thank you to everybody who checked in with us. I know, y'all, it wasn't the best trade deadline. It felt a little bit like we got a bill of goods here with the trade deadline, but the only thing that I can do is just enjoy the games and analyze the games and try and hope that things work out and that they have this big plan. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this show. For Brad, I am Double G. We are Thompson to Clark on the Bay Area Sports Podcast Network, BSPN. We will see you all later, and have a good night.